When you're operating from emotional intelligence, you now operate from a place what we call intentions, not expectations. See, you can control your intentions. Therefore, you can control yourself. That's the only thing you can control. Assertiveness focuses on you. How are you communicating to yourself? From your inner critic or your inner champion? Maybe it's a combination of both, but which voice are you operating mostly from? Most communication in the world, especially in business, is based on assumptions and speculation. That's the number one problem. Take ownership of you. Regardless of your title, regardless of where you are in your life, focus on you. That's the only thing that you control.
Welcome to another episode of Extraordinary Leadership Podcast. This is a place where you gain valuable insights that can truly transform your business, leadership, and organization. My name is Dagmara Asbreuk. I am a host of this show, founder of Extraordinary Leadership, and transformational partner to executives and founders. And today we'll have a very important topic, and it goes about emotional intelligence, the key critical factor of success in leadership and in team performance. And that's what we will dive in today with my very special guests, Chris Salem, who is a leading expert in emotional intelligence for leadership, communication, and sales acceleration and talent development. Chris helps organizations build psychological safety and high-performing cultures that drive engagement and results. And he is certified workplace strategist, best-selling author, and a keynote speaker who also have two shows, Sustainable Success and Business Influence, empowering leaders to align emotional intelligence with business growth. So I am super happy to have you, Chris, on this show, and I think the topic is extremely important for the audience. So welcome.
Thank you, Dagmara. Appreciate it. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I know that for you it's just very early in the morning.
Yes. Well, I'm an early bird. I'm up at about 3:30 every morning, so I've already did my routine this morning, my workout. So yeah, I'm good to go.
Well, that's an important one, right? When we can set our self in a state with our routines, then the day is won. Perfect. Well, happy you done it before the podcast. All right. So, Chris, well, first of all, the opening question for me and for our audience is, how did you come to do what you do now? And, your passion to emotional
Well,
intelligence.
it's a great question because it was actually a personal story. I'm 58 years old, but this goes way back to when I was 31 years old. So I would say for the listeners, for the first 31 years of my life, I operated in a much different way than I have been over the second half of my life. I always say I was reborn after the age of 31, but those first 31 years, I really operated from a level of anxiety. I operated from anger, and how I processed information and, interacted with other people in situations was from those negative emotion of anger. And a lot of these things went back to my self-limiting beliefs that were established during my child development years. Now, why am I sharing this? Because I want to give some context of what I do today and how I'm helping people and business leaders grow through the power of emotional intelligence. Because that term was foreign to me when back when I was 31 years old. But nonetheless, I had grown up in a dysfunctional family, codependency, operated from anger each and every day, struggled with 12 years of addiction. And as a result of it, it impacted my confidence, self-esteem, and my ability to sustain relationships, to grow business, to even, enhance my personal life. Nonetheless, I had a life-changing moment when my father was 56 years old. He was dying of cancer, which in my opinion was from his own self-limiting beliefs that he had stuffed the way he felt for so many years and manifested itself into cancer. But my father was rarely involved in my life up to that point. And I can remember sitting down with him a day before he died, and he couldn't speak. He was on morphine. They were just winding his body down to, allow him to die peacefully. And I remember him looking over at me, eyes half shut, couldn't talk, but he was speaking to me. And to this day, I can't explain how I could understand what he was saying because I did without actual words. Strange, I know, but it's the truth. And with that being said, I remember him looking over at me and saying to me, "I've always loved you and your brother." And my brother never felt that. I actually never felt that to that level. I was always searching for his validation that I never got. No coincidence why I was a passive communicator and always seeking people's validation up to that point. Now, I didn't know this at the time. And I remember him saying that even loved your mother, even though my parents had been divorced now for 9, 10 years up to that point. And he said he did the best he could for what he knew. And when he said that, it kinda sat with me for a second, and I looked back and I said, "Oh my god, my dad was always treated like garbage from my grandfather. He was never felt like part of, his family." And then I realized for the first time that, my dad could only be what he knew. He was just repeating the same patterns that were done to him, and I didn't even realize that up to that point. And it was that first time in my life that I said, "No matter what deck of cards you've been dealt, as an adult, it's your responsibility, no one else's, to do something about it." And that was the wake-up call for me. And my father passed peacefully the next day, and to this day, he gave me the greatest gift I could ever imagine and made up for all those years of that validation that I didn't receive, that I could say that for now, I was gonna change my life. I went into a 12-step program. I adopt Eastern meditation and philosophy that changed my way of life, changed the way I think, changed the way I processed information, changed the way I communicated, and I embarked on a 5-year journey where I worked hard on myself and eventually made these changes, all through what a lot of people know today as emotional intelligence. And that is what got me into emotional intelligence and how I used it, not only in my personal and business life from there on out, but what I decided to do with it to help other people, especially leaders, transform where they are and where they desire to be.
Well, amazing story. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I
You're
love
welcome.
the pivotal points that you call gifts, honesty in sharing that, because that also shows your maturity.
My wife sometimes still says I could be a kid, but we still got to have that kid in us somewhere.
That's it. We want to preserve the good one, and to alchemize and transform the ones that we
Yeah.
don't need to carry anymore, which this has been surely a process, right? So, yeah, there are so many questions that comes to me, and the very first, just from your story, is what did you discover in this journey that, follow through after receiving these big gifts and, what did you do and what did you discover there?
Excellent question. I mean, I realized that, not only myself, but most people in the world, we operate our daily lives and how we do business based on how we get caught up in the control we can't control. This is why we have anxiety, why we have stress, why we have people that feel overwhelmed, feel frustrated, eventually angry, whatever. And then of course they react from. See, the reality is you can't control other people no matter what you do, and you can't control situations. You might be able to control certain aspects of a situation, but you can't control them outright. And because we've been taught from the time we were toddlers to operate our lives from expectations, right there is the problem. See, expectations are always tied to the control you can't control. They're tied to outcomes. This is why when somebody comes to you and says, "I got to have you complete this project in the next 2 days." And the first thing your mind does is say, "Oh my God, I got to get this done in 2 days." And you are now focused on the end result, the outcome. And you become stressed. You become anxious. You begin to kind of sweat and you begin to react because you're tied to the outcome, to the control you can't control. See, when you're operating from emotional intelligence, you now operate from a place what we call intentions, not expectations. See, you can control your intentions. Therefore, you can control yourself. That's the only thing you can control is yourself. You can control your communication to yourself in an assertive versus a passive aggressive way. Passive and aggressive styles of communication are tied to expectations and how you get caught up in the control you can't control with other people and those situations. Assertiveness focuses on you. How are you communicating to yourself? From your inner critic or your inner champion? Maybe it's a combination of both, but which voice are you operating mostly from? If you're listening to your inner critic more than your inner champion, people can't see that, but it comes out in other ways in how you communicate to them in a passive and or aggressive way. When you're operating from your inner champion, you're more likely to be operating from assertiveness, where you are specific, clear, and concise with your communication, leaving very little to no room for assumption and speculation. You are responsible as the sender and the receiver for that effective communication. We speak in a chunking style way, where we speak in shorter, concise statements to make sure the person listening fully understood. We ask a clarifying question, again, leaving no room for assumption and speculation. And this is the reason why expectations fall through the cracks. This is the reason why we have conflict, why we have people that don't follow through, because we just assume and speculate that somebody understands what you said. This is why we have divorces and partnerships that dissolve, whatever. All of this can be tied back to this. And with that being said, when we have the ability now to be intentional and we can be assertive in our communication, we're now on the right path to move forward. Another thing we could control is our behavior. Our behavior is assertive versus passive aggressive. How many times do we know people that can be passive in their communication and then aggressive in their behavior? Contradicts what they said. We know a lot of people like that. That was me. I was a passive communicator and I was an aggressive behaviorist. Now, some people could be the opposite or a combination of both. Now, with that being said, we can also control our attitude. It's happening for you, not to you. When it's happening to you, you are the victim. You use excuses. You deflect how you feel about situations and other people onto other people. This is why we have people who gossip, complain, and so forth. When it's happening for you, we see challenges, obstacles, problems as opportunities. You embrace them. It's part of the process to lead you to the results you seek. Because without a problem, challenge, or obstacle, you're never going to be creative, innovative, and be able to develop, new products, new services, new ideas without them. There is an opportunity disguised in every challenge, in every problem, and every setback. Number 4, you can control your emotions, how you respond versus react. They are different. See, negative emotions are not a bad thing. It's just your mind and body sharing with you that something is unresolved. In my case, my anger went back to my childhood, to my father, because he was not always there emotionally. So I was always seeking that validation. So I had to, anytime when I'm operating from anger up to that point, even though something triggered the anger, that wasn't what caused the anger. That anger was deeply rooted back to my childhood. So I would question anybody listening that if you're operating from anger, jealousy, envy, it's not what just happened that triggered it. Yes, it triggered it, but it goes much deeper to something in your childhood. And if you can get to the root cause of it, you're now able to remove it. Just like how you can remove cancer, you get it at the root level, it's not coming back. So from our emotions, we can learn to respond versus react. So if something triggers I get some bad news from a colleague that a project fell through. Okay, I may not be happy about it, but I'm not going to react from it. I'm going to pause and take a breath, and then I'm going to respond from a secondary positive emotion. I might take 10 minutes. Then I can respond. I might sleep on it, and then I may respond or send that email. I'm not reacting from it. And number 5 is action. You could take massive action to the priorities that matter. Many people are operating from distractions each and every day. They're caught up in things that are not even important or even relevant to what they're working on. And they use those distractions as excuses, as a form of procrastination to not get things done, and then blame others for why things fall through the cracks. It's relevant. We see this rampant in any size organization around the world. When we are focused now on the priorities that truly matter, that are important, those are the awful ones that make us a little unsettled. They give us, you get those butterflies in our stomach. Those are the things that we should be focused on, and we should be delegating more, delegating the things that are still important and urgent, but to other sources and people that can do it better, freeing up our time to focus on the things that truly need our attention and that we're good at. See, if we can focus on those 5 things each and every day from intentions and let go of the same 5 things in other people and situations, you're now going to create, from your example and resourcefulness, an interdependent environment versus a codependent environment. You're teaching people through your example and resourcefulness to own their role and duties, to own their mistakes, to be accountable, to speak up if they don't understand something, to feel psychologically safe when they don't understand something. So as a unit, we can come together and do bigger and better things interdependently versus codependently. So that's the whole idea about EQ, to give you a foundation and what I've learned and what today that I've been teaching organizations around the world in this area, and what I speak on at leading industry B2B, B2C conferences worldwide.
Very nice. And, I love from a top perspective, first of all, how you distilled it into kind of 5, because the less we have to focus, it's easier to focus. And
Yes,
we will, in a seconds, repeat them 5 that are also actionable, right? That are also something that you can really turn into focused and intentional action. And I think overall, what I'm hearing, it's the importance to understand that you have control on the other things that are in your control, which is within yourself.
correct.
And those
Yeah, you
5
can't
things
control
are
other
all
people.
the things that you can control from inside out. So let us walk once again through. So first was assumptions, right? So our brain make a lot of assumptions. Let us walk through its 5 just once
Yeah,
again.
yeah. We most communication in the world, especially in business, is based on assumptions and speculation.
Yes.
That's the number one problem. Then you
Yes.
layer in other things that I'd even speak on. There's personality differences, there's generational differences, there's cultural and ethnic differences where English is not the first language, for instance. So we just assume that when we share something that, oh yeah, that person, how I speak to a task-oriented person is gonna be completely different from a people-centric person in terms of
Mm,
personality. How I speak to a baby boomer overall, I'm not saying everybody who's a baby boomer is gonna be the same way or everybody who's a Gen Z is gonna be the same way, but just, in general, how you speak to a baby boomer overall will be different than a Gen Z or a young millennial. Yet people don't are not aware of that, and then they get frustrated when somebody, let's say, is a lot younger than them. Like, why are they not understanding what I'm saying? Why can they not follow through and do what has been asked? Because they think they should be understanding what they said, and they don't. These are the root cause of these problems that we keep managing the problem and keep, managing the symptoms and treating the symptoms to it and not
yeah.
getting to the root cause.
Yes. So I think here for the takeaway for the listeners is to really stop assuming and start asking questions, start get curious. Because yes, the brain make actually very fast assumptions because that's how the brain operates, right? So we,
Yes.
we believe we understand the other person, but we're not. It's just, some past examples. And yeah, there are so many variants, right? Cultural, personality style, generational. So, in order not to fall the trap, and you mentioned before, into conflicts and either in business or in marriage or long meetings, which are in disalignment, nobody understood itself, right? The elephant in the room is still there.
Well, a lot of
So, I
lot
think
of
we need
times
to
people
listen.
don't even factor body language. I mean, think about effective communication. 100%, 55% of effective communication is in body language. 38%
Mm,
is in the tone of the voice. Only 7%
yeah.
words. Most people, if you were to ask them about communication, what makes it most effective, they would say words. It's not true.
Yes. The opposite,
Go
right?
People are not always gonna remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you helped them to make them feel, and body language has a big part in that. I always say, like, I always use this as an example, like, if my wife came home and she said and I asked her, "How was your day?" And she did this and kinda looked away, it was okay. Now, most
Mm,
people, a lot of guys would just say, "Oh, great, glad to hear you had a good day," and moved on, not realizing she didn't have a good day because what gave it away was she had her arms folded. That was a defensive mood that she maybe perhaps didn't want to talk about it at that point, and her tone of voice wasn't enthusiastic. It wasn't okay. So right there, see, words can be manipulated and lied to. The
Mm,
body and the tone would never lie. I
absolutely.
mean, and the eyes give it away too. If somebody can't look, I mean, I'm not saying if somebody's shy, I can understand they can't look at you if or they're introverted or autistic. But for the most part, I can tell when somebody says something and their body language contradicts what they said because I've been
Yes.
studying this for 20 something years. This is why I do what I do. But most people are oblivious to that and just take it for granted, say, "Okay, everything's good," and it's not. And this is why
Yes.
teams are not in unison and they're not connected and why performance is lagging. So all the KPIs, OKRs that when they're not where you want them to be, a lot of this can be tied to what we're talking about here.
Yes, absolutely. And this goes back to listening actively, listening up empathically. And it ties in with where I come from is your energy never lies. You can use beautiful words, but if your energy is not in alignment with that which comes through your voice and through your body language, it's just subconscious, right? So we communicate vastly subconsciously, isn't it? Beautiful. So the first, I think, what I'm hearing and takeaway for the listeners is stop assuming, start observing, start listening, start asking questions that will bring you more to effective way of communication in different contexts, right?
Absolutely, Demar. And, and you made a great point. Great leaders don't tell. There's a place to be direct and tell in certain situations, like if you were a fire chief or a captain in a police department, there a lot of times there could be life or death situations. You have to be direct.
Mm,
But the most effective way is to share. And I like to disguise the impact I like to get across to people in a question because I empower them now to think about how they're going to answer it. So they seem like they're in control in how they're going to respond. And that gives them an opportunity to reflect that maybe I didn't do my best. Maybe I have been dropping the ball and I got to get better at what I do. But see, now they're answering themselves. I'm not telling them they're dropping the ball or you screwed up because that's going to put them on the defense. That's going to get them to kind of say, "Hey, I haven't been dropping the ball. I've been doing this, this, and this," because they're trying to defend themselves rather now empowering them to see for themselves to answer for themselves where they can get better. And it more likely puts people on the offense and creates a psychologically safe place. I'm not saying you're
mm,
going to bat 1,000 because if you had 10 people you're working with, it's never going to work with all 10 people. But if it can work and improve your batting average from, increase it, and now it's working for more people in your team, well, you're moving in the right direction. Some people are just never
absolutely.
going to get it. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
So I feel, Chris, we could spend probably the whole episode on this one, but I want to explore the other four, right?
Yeah,
so let's go to the second one. Can you remind me what was the second out of the five?
behavior.
Behavior. Okay. So let's remind ourselves and what is the key point here for the listeners?
The key point is we always got to make sure that is our behavior in alignment with our communication.
Mm,
Assertiveness means, again, being specific, clear, and concise, leaving very little to no room for assumption and speculation. If you say something and then your behavior contradicts what you said, well, guess what? People are going to, it's going to confuse people and it's going to often put people on the defense. And that's not going to lead to anything that's going to be productive and keep in bringing people together to get something done. So you want to be mindful and aware through EQ that your behavior is in alignment with your communication in an assertive versus a passive or aggressive way.
yeah. So this, follow through on what you say that falls into that category as
Correct.
well. Because sometimes we can say so much, but we don't follow through. We don't demonstrate it in actions, in behaviors, in body language, as you mentioned.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's the incongruence. And we basically, the trust is gone.
Companies do this all the time. They say things and then their actions and their behavior and everything else contradict what they say. And this is why we have retention problems, why we have absenteeism, why we have all these issues. And a lot of times the companies will just blame the other people for that instead of looking at their part. It's a two-way street. It's not that one side is wrong.
Yes. And I remember myself something from, I think that was business psychology. The very basic fact that as a human beings, we role model behaviors like children. role model the behaviors of the parents. You can say, don't watch, electronics and yourself, you on the phone, right? And then there is no incongruence between what you tell me I should be doing and what you're doing, isn't it? So it's kind of similar. We are like, well, at the end, we are Homo sapiens, right? We're also animals, right? So we kind of follow not what you say, but what you're doing, what you're demonstrating, how you're being.
Correct. And then
So the
attitude
third
is the
one,
third one.
yeah,
Attitude.
tell us more about the attitude because that's one is important one.
The attitude again is just for simple for the listeners. It's happening for you versus to you. If you are
Mm.
complaining, you are gossiping, you are deflecting how you feel onto other people, then you're caught up in an attitude that's happening to you. You're the victim. We got to stop doing that. We have to be able to see obstacles, challenges, setbacks as opportunities, embrace them because without them, life would become stagnant. Business would come to a stall. If we're going to become innovative, creative, and move forward and do bigger and better things, you can't do it without challenges, obstacles, and setbacks. It's impossible. So we have to be able to see it as it's happening for us, not to us, attitude wise.
Absolutely resonate with that. I think the first person I've heard from about that was Tony Robbins a long time ago. And then it repeated in many of my, gurus and coaches, because that's about narratives. That's
Yeah.
about the story we tell ourselves is shaping the experience, isn't it?
Correct, and this is why all these things go back to our childhood. If we have these self-limiting beliefs, we all do. We all have them in some way or another on different levels. When we become aware, we can see how these self-limiting beliefs are impacting all the 5 areas we talked about, how we communicate in a passive or aggressive way rather than an assertive way, how our behavior is contradicting what we're saying, our attitude, it's happening to you like a victim. You're reacting to situations of people through anger, jealousy, envy, rather than responding from a positive emotion. And you're using excuses and procrastinating, getting caught up in distractions that are meaningless versus things that really matter. So, all these things can be traced back to self limiting beliefs. We don't realize how powerful they are. They drive us each and every day. But when you can be aware of them and learn to get to the root cause of them, you can eventually eradicate them and begin to operate from a different narrative, as you said, Dagmara, which I did when I went through this process back 26 years ago. It took me 5 years. And to this day, I have a daily routine that I do every day to keep my thinking in that pattern each and every day.
Mhm.
I don't take it for granted. So I have a daily routine through meditation, journaling, I do Tai Chi, I walk, I read. I keep my mind in the present moment, but I have to do this every day to keep my mind there. Otherwise, I could go right back to how I was, 26 plus years ago if I took it for granted and just thought like, "Hey, I've graduated." No, we never graduate from this. It's always ongoing. We have to be consistent through discipline to do things to think differently. And that is what I've seen the difference in organizations, families, and communities that are here that can be here. And it's very few in
Absolutely.
between, but they're out there, and they are great examples to model from that we can do for ourselves if we commit to it, and it's gotta come from the top down, no doubt.
And it is one of the key enabler to successful leadership as well, especially when you go up and your challenges grow. One of my clients call it a mental hygiene. And he created for himself also habits because, of course, that's one of the fundamental things as well that I do with clients, and I'm sure you do as well, because this is where a lot of leaders in this simple, practical application can fall through because we have so much on a plate and we will do it when we have time, right? But what you're just highlighting is the most important thing, that it's about practice. It's like going to the gym, right? If we don't go regularly to the gym, we can't be really in shape as we want.
Correct.
So it's exactly here. We want to be in a mind state, yeah, in an energy and mind state, which is a result of daily practices like what you just described.
I love what you just said because I just did this with a client that I've been working with for 3 years. He was a senior manager for a in the aircraft industry, and he was a passive communicator. And oftentimes he would go off on tangents, he would over explain. And it was starting to rub people the wrong way, even his own people that worked for him, even the people that he worked for. And all of this went back to his childhood. Again, that lack of validation from his father. And we worked together for 3 months, and to this day, he's still working on it, and he saw great improvement in his communication, and even people coming up to him and saying, "What? You're speaking differently. You sound like you got my attention, like, I'm actually following what you're actually saying now versus always guessing what you were trying to get across." And so, like, what you just said is that consistency is the key, and only discipline will lead to consistency. If you're waiting for motivation, good luck. It's fleeting. It will never be the answer to make those changes. It's only through discipline, doing it, knowing it's going to work for you, even when it's the last thing you want to do, you do it anyway.
Yes, and what can help you is basically always hold in your mind the vision, the result, the purpose, the meaning why you do that. Because it's not just doing for doing, right? We do it because we want to become better leaders. Because we want to
Correct.
make a better impact. Because we want to be better human beings. And then we can picture the vision. What happens, what's different when we actually there. So beautiful that you brought limiting beliefs, because you talk about it, or mention about it many times, and that's of course such a fundamental and important thing. And the question I have, out of curiosity, what is the one of the most important limiting belief that you needed to transform? You needed to overcome?
Well, for me, it was the need for validation because I didn't get it growing
Mm.
up from my father. And as a result of that, as I grew up to become an adult, I was always seeking that validation in other people. This was why I became a passive communicator. So if somebody needed something,
Mhm.
I would drop everything I was doing to do for them, only to be mad at myself because I put my agenda to the side to do for somebody else. I never ended up living up to their expectation. They would then get angry at me, and then I would be angry at myself for letting go of what
Mm.
I had to do, and then I would lash back with this aggressive behavior. So that passive aggressive behavior was just off-putting, and it created a lot of friction and a lot of problems in my personal and professional life. And all of that went back for that need for validation that I had to overcome. I had to learn that I don't have to be validated. All I have to do is show up to be my best, not the best. See, I always had to come up each and every day to be the best. That's exhausting. That is tiresome. My goal is to just show up. How can I be better than I was yesterday? That's it.
Mm.
And I would say for people, a lot of times that is a big issue for a lot of people, validation. For
Yeah.
women, it tends to be abandonment, not literal physical abandonment, but emotional abandonment, either from a mother or a father when growing up. And oftentimes, this is what can lead to passive behaviors and communication as well. And oftentimes, where they're taken advantage of because they're also seeking that emotional connection that they didn't get growing up. And so you got to find healthier ways to get to the root cause of it and to fill that gap in a better way so you can operate differently. And that will help raise your level of confidence, self-esteem. And this is especially true for sales. I work with sales teams with the emotional EQ advantage. Sales training is great. Nothing wrong. It's going
Mhm.
to teach you a lot of things. But the reason why the 80-20 rule never changes is because those programs never address the mindset. They never address
Yeah,
that on their sales team, you're gonna have people with different levels of confidence, different levels of self-esteem, and if you don't address that through EQ, a lot of that training is gonna go right out the door. It's gonna go right out the
absolutely.
door, and I've done this, and we've made significant changes when people have committed to the process because this stuff takes time. It's not something that you flip a switch and it happens overnight, but I could tell you it can make a huge difference when companies commit from the top down. And I know I did this with a company 3 years ago. I worked with their team over 2.5 years, and we saw a significant increase in KPIs and OKRs over that time on an individual, team, and organizational level. Not that it was a huge company, but 600 people. But it took me 2.5 years to do groups of 12 people over that time to work with them because you couldn't obviously work with all 600 at the same time. That would have been impossible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And that's, I think, so, so important. And I completely resonate with what you say. That's what I see. It's also lacking in many leadership development programs and support in let me say evolving as leaders and climbing up the ladder, and business owners who maybe have never been, in any of the corporate life and so on. Because as you said, I mean, most of the human beings, doesn't matter the level they are in the organization, if they haven't ever looked within, right? And to those things that they buried, right? Let's forget about it. That's my childhood. Usually it show up in leadership, in business success, in organization success, in team dynamic. And a lot of human beings walk with either lack of validation or self love or acceptance or feeling that they are enough. And then that shows up in so many multitude of different behaviors, including procrastination, right? So as you mentioned, and this is topic by itself, a huge, huge one. But I'm happy that you mentioned that because that's, I think, reoccurring topic in this podcast. Since it's important that we do that work. That's actually the essence of transformation. All right, now we go to the point 4 and 5. I know, watching the time, Chris. What was the fourth one?
Fourth
On
was emotions, again, how we respond versus react to other people and situations. So just like a child, when you observed your parents going through a difficult situation or talking to another person, if they reacted out of anger or out of jealousy, a child's going to observe that, whether if they know that consciously or not. Do you think that's going to impact the child when they become an adult? Sure. They might do the opposite of what their parent did, or they might do the same thing and repeat the same patterns. So we have to be mindful as leaders that our peers and people who work for us and people you work for, they're observing you, whether if they know it consciously or not. So how you respond versus react to difficult situations and difficult people is powerful because you're teaching them that they can possibly adopt that for themselves to handle these difficult situations and people and not repeat the same patterns that just keep making matters worse and worse and worse. So responding versus reacting is always better long term.
just a question here, maybe for the listeners. How would you advise the person to discern? Am I responding or reacting in this very
Yeah.
moment? Maybe with one little example.
Sure. Well, like I said, a lot of times if, let's say somebody that works for you comes to you and shares with you something fell through the cracks, something didn't work out. And that first reaction is like you're angry. Now, normally what would you say? So you might just whatever comes out of your mouth is going to come out of your mouth because that's what you've done time and time and time again. All that's doing is adding more fuel to the fire. It's not helping the situation. Matter of fact, it's going to end up putting that person more on the defense and less likely to want to give you all the information, fearing that you're going to pin it on them and they just want to kind of keep things safe. So in this case, it's just to be mindful of when something comes up that triggers that feeling to
Mm.
just a pause, just take a breath. You don't have to say anything right then. Just pause. If you can't now honestly say that I can now respond, remove yourself for 5, 10 minutes before you come back and address that person or situation. Sleep on it before you come back and send that email or speak to those people. So discernment means that again, just knowing when those triggers come, pause is always the best thing. And then ask yourself, even on a deeper level, why is this getting me upset? And, again, nobody wants unsettling news, but if I keep now getting really overly upset about it, there's probably
Mm.
something deeper to that than just that situation. Oftentimes, again, going back deeper
Yes.
into our childhood. My case, it was my father, that unresolved anger that my father wasn't the father I wanted him to be. And I had to come to terms with that, and I was able to let that go. So these triggers that once used to control me, or I allowed to control me, that got me angry and reacted from it, no longer had its power over me. I'm not saying that I don't still get angry. I just don't allow myself to react from it, and I don't allow that anger to linger. I just let it go. I work on it, and then I respond from a positive emotion. That's what I would just share with everybody. This is not something like you're gonna turn off your negative emotions for forever. No, that'll never happen. Negative emotions are actually a good thing. They're just again, they're just messages from the
Alert.
body and mind that tell you that something's unresolved. That's all it is.
Exactly. So I love how you basically well, mentioned on two levels, all right? So in the moment, breathe, pause. That's the basic techniques. Drink a
Yes,
glass of water. Sometimes that also helps. And in the long run, look within, because that's where we'll find
absolutely.
how to. And I think at the end, it goes about acting from your higher level, right, of self,
Yeah.
rather than falling to the autopilot of your subconscious. Yeah,
It's fear. It's
beautiful.
fear that people operate
Of
from.
course.
Am I And fear thrives in
Mm,
the past and the future. When your mind is in the past and the future,
absolutely.
your self-limiting beliefs are activated, and that fear is what people are making decisions from, how they're processing
Yes.
information. But if we can be present, fear is reduced. So even if the world is falling apart around you, in that moment, it doesn't have its grip on you unless you allow it to. And it's just miraculously always everything always ends up working out regardless for some reason. So this is why we have to
Mm,
trust the process. That
mm,
I always look at it like a puzzle. You have a 100-piece puzzle, and you have 12 pieces to work towards your 100-piece puzzle. Why am I gonna worry about the 88 pieces I don't have? I don't have them. They're not in my control. Why am I gonna worry and stress and point the finger at other people because I don't have the other 88 pieces? I'm gonna work with the 12 pieces I have, trust the process that the other pieces will come into my control over time to complete the puzzle. So when people ask me, Chris, what are your expectations to get this project done? I don't have any. How are you going to get it done? There's no sense of urgency. No, I have a plan. I have goals. I have systems, activities. I have priorities. My intentions are to do this, this, and this based upon what's in my control each day. What is not in my control, I trust the process of what isn't will be in my control at some point to complete the puzzle. How I get to the result is intentional. It's not from expectations. So it's just a completely different mindset of
hmm.
getting to still the results, but I'm not tied to the outcome. I'm tied to the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's also showing up many times, right? So focus on the process, love this journey, enjoy the journey, because that's where the results come, right? From it, not obsession of the outcome. Is it there yet? Is it there yet? And trusting the process, absolutely. And the fifth was action, right?
Yes, action.
And I guess here, if I remember well, but it's about aligned actions, right? Actions that really move the needle, not
Correct.
just being busy, as we can
Busy
always
and
do
not
ourselves.
productive. Procrastination.
All right, beautiful. So we ran through this five important elements, and you mentioned that if everybody could focus on it, that will transform communication, culture, how people and leaders engage with each other. And yeah, that's I can see that, and I like that we walk through that, because that gives the audience as well a practical anchors and food for thought, what they can take away from it, and what's it's the time to start with. Maybe two last questions, Chris. Where do you see the biggest challenge on this five for leaders working with organizations and leaders?
Wow, it's a great question, Dagmar. I would say it all has to start with communication, because if
Mhm.
we're not communicating effectively to ourselves, we're never going to communicate effectively to other people. You may think that, hey, nobody knows I'm operating from my inner critic most of the time. I can still put a
Mm,
smile on my face. I can still look like I'm doing, acting the part, but in reality, it's coming out. Just like how water will always find a way to get to where it's got to go. If you are operating from your inner critic, it's going to come out passively or aggressively with other people. It's just going to cause more ineffective communication. And now imagine another person, now they're operating from their self-limiting beliefs and they're doing the same thing. This is what's going to create this codependent, unsafe, not psychologically safe
mhm,
workplace. But if we can now elevate this and put more attention and have people like yourself and people that are dedicated to developing leaders and teams and organizations, this can have a huge impact over time, not only to take care of retention issues, but it's going to help in productivity. It's going to help in more efficiency. It's going to increase revenue. It's going to increase net profit margin, and stakeholders are going to love that. Now, I know stakeholders don't like to wait. They want results now, but nonetheless, leaders have to step up and sometimes say, hey, we're not going to have these numbers right now, but we're working on that because we're working on our foundation first. So, if, like, it's like building a house. You could build a
mm,
beautiful home and you can furnish it with the best luxury items that you could ever imagine. But if you didn't take time to cultivate that foundation, guess what? That house is going to have major problems. You're going to constantly be managing those problems, spending more money on the back end to maintain it. And probably worst case scenario, it's going to come crashing down because the foundation was faulty. We can now revamp our foundation starting at the individual, team, and organizational level. And over time, that's what's going to build that success in layers up from that foundation to create better results. Does that mean that you'll never have a problem or challenge again? No, you'll have even more challenges, but you embrace them because the more challenges you have, the more opportunities you'll have. And the more opportunities you have, the more results that you will generate from them. I can't stress the importance that they come from challenges. They don't come when everything is going right or just the opportunity itself. An opportunity is not possible without a challenge, an obstacle, or problem.
Yes, beautiful. And it starts with you. And these five
Starts with you.
things the listeners can take away and reflect, okay, where do I need to shift? Where do I need to dive into with someone to help me, right? Amazing. So, Chris, what is the message that you want to leave the audience with from this amazing conversation today?
I would just say that what I would like to leave everybody is just take ownership of you.
Hmm.
Regardless of your title, regardless of where you are in your life, focus on you. That's the only thing that you control. The best gift you can give your colleague, your peer, people that work for you, people that you work for, your spouse, your children, your community, is your example of these things we talked about today and your resourcefulness. It's the best gift. It's better than just doing for them. You're empowering them and encouraging them to do for themselves. That's what creates an interdependent environment, no matter what that is, in your home, your community, and in your organization.
I can detail that. Absolutely. Everything starts with you. Be the change you want to see. Thank you very much, Chris. We will, of course, put LinkedIn to this description so that anyone who is interested to connect with you can connect, because I know that you're present in LinkedIn. Is there anything else and any other ways that people can connect and learn about you and what you do?
Sure. Well, I mean, LinkedIn is always the best place. I also have two emails, my Chris at ChristopherSalem.com. That is my subject matter expert and professional keynote speaking site on the area of emotional intelligence in business. You can reach me there. Or Chris at sustainablesuccess.net. That's more of my business and consulting. So either one of those emails or websites are fine, but LinkedIn is always great because I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit compared to the other social media platforms.
Amazing. We'll put them as well in the description. Thank you very much, Chris, for sharing with us your 5 key drivers of emotional intelligence and success and sustainable success, right? And collaboration in organizations. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'm wishing you, of course, a wonderful day ahead. I can see that the sun is just rising for you. So you starting your day. I know
Yes.
you have done your routine, so you're in the greatest shape.
Yes.
And speak to you in another occasion again.
Thank you so much, Dagmar, for having me on and serving your audience today.
Thank you very much. And to the listeners, thank you very much for being with us, staying until the end. I truly believe that there is a lot of value, and I invite you to reflect on those 5 key enablers of emotional intelligence, because truly it starts with ownership of them for yourself, and that will make a truly difference in your organization and business. Thank you for listening and watching to us today, and see you next time.